Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Business English. Now, over the next few weeks, I'll be dedicating the episodes to working on some techniques for giving a solid presentation. This series is perfect for intermediate level students who want to work on improving their presentation skills and gain more confidence giving a presentation in English. So if you have to give presentations at work, whether it be to a small or a large group on varying topics, then this series is perfect for you. Okay, so today we're going to start with the basics and look at the language and techniques we can use to open a presentation. So today I'll be covering the following: the purpose of our introduction, expressions for opening a presentation, and structure and example of the introduction. Okay, let's take a look at the type of language we need to open a presentation. So, the purpose of the introduction. As with most things, okay, presenting is a skill. So, once we have all of this information clear, we can practice and improve quickly. Now, remember, planning is essential. Once you have memorized the language and the structure, then in the future, you'll be able to give more spontaneous presentations and you'll feel a lot more confident. Before we can start our presentation introduction, we need to understand the purpose and structure. So put simply, our presentation introduction introduces the speaker and the outline and points to be discussed in our presentation. So with this in mind, we need to have the objective and points of our presentation very clear before we start to work on the introduction. Okay, so all presentations should have a clear communicative objective and a message. Okay, so the purpose of our presentation is to communicate a message, and that is central to our communicative objective. Okay, so you need to ask yourself, what is the message that I'm trying to convey to my audience? And if the message is not clear, then the presentation will most probably not go well. Secondly, you must be very clear with your audience. Okay, you need to guide them with signposting language. And I'll look at this in more detail a bit later. However, you should follow the old rule. Tell them what you're going to say. Tell them what you said. So this can also basically be summarized as preview, give, and review. So the preview stage is what we're going to focus on today. And the give stage is the body of the presentation, and the review stage is the conclusion. So, right, with our introduction, we're going to do two main things, okay? We're going to introduce ourselves and then introduce our presentation while listing the main points that will be discussed during the presentation. We can also give some indication of how long the talk will last, and finally, some rules for questions. To be clear, when we list the main points to be discussed, we need to use very short and concise language with zero detail, okay? Just the main idea, no examples. And when we set the rules for questions, we have really only two options, okay? Questions can be asked during the talk, or you will take them at the end of the talk, okay? Those are your two options, during or after. It is good to let your audience know what you prefer, okay, at the beginning. Depending on the type of talk, you may prefer one over the other. So if you're giving, for example, a sales presentation to a small number of people, you may encourage your audience to interrupt you with any questions. On the other hand, if you are presenting to a large group or you're at a conference, for example, you should take questions at the end. This is to ensure you stay on point and don't get distracted by too many questions, okay, which can happen. Now, well, there you have an overview basically of the purpose and structure of an introduction. So just to recap, we need to introduce ourselves, then we need to introduce the topic of our presentation. Following on from that, we list the points that we will be discussing during the presentation. And finally, we give an indication of how long the presentation will last and the rules for asking questions. Simple, right? So let's move on to the next part of the episode, where we will look at the type of language we need to open a presentation. So language and expressions. In this part of the episode, I'm going to break down the language that you need according to the different function. Okay, so the first one is I'll list the function and then the expressions. Okay, so the first function is introducing yourself, and you could use one of the following expressions. Hi, my name is Andrew. Good morning. As some of you may know, my name is Andrew. Good afternoon. I'm Andrew. I'm Chief Analyst here at Deloitte. So that is just some expressions for introducing yourself. And next, to give thanks. Okay, it's always nice to thank people when you begin. So thank you for having me is one option. It's a pleasure being here. Or thanks, John. For example, if John introduces you and then hands the talk over to you, you can thank John for introducing you. Okay, so the next one is expressing purpose and topic. So I'm here today to, that's one option. I'm going to talk about, another option. I plan to say a few words about. The purpose or the aim or the objective today is to. The subject of my talk is. The theme of my presentation is. I'm here today too. So those are expressions you can use for expressing the purpose and the topic of your presentation. The next one is the structure and signposting. So I've divided my talk into 3 parts. My talk will be divided into 4 parts. Let me begin with. To start with. First, I'd like to look at. In the second part, secondly or second. Then in the second part, third, I'll be talking about. My fourth point will be about. And finally, I'll be looking at. So those are some expressions there for structuring and signposting your introduction and the points that you'll discuss in your presentation. Next one is timing and schedule. So my presentation will take or will last about 25 minutes. We will be having coffee at 11:15. We'll stop for lunch at 12:45. Now, finally, inviting or taking questions. So we'll start with inviting questions. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. Please stop me at any time if you have any questions. Now, discouraging questions until the end. I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. After my talk, there will be time for questions and discussions. Well, there you are. You have a good overview of the key language you need to introduce your presentation, okay? And these are the building blocks, okay? The building blocks or the structure that you need to work with to structure your presentation. All you need to do is adapt your topic to these structural elements, and basically you will quickly have an effective and clear presentation introduction. So in the next part of the episode, I'm going to show you guys how to structure this into dialogue. You should always plan and write out your presentation before you actually start with your PowerPoint. So that's a little tip, okay? Many people make the mistake of building their presentation in PowerPoint before they have built their presentation outline in Word. So that's a little tip from me. Start with Word and finish with PowerPoint. Okay, let's take a look at how we can put this dialogue together. So, creating the introduction dialogue. Here, you can simply put the pieces together and structure your introduction using the language I have provided for you above. Okay, so remember, everything should be clearly linked to your message or your communicative communicative objective. Also remember that we must tell people exactly where we are going. Keep everyone on the same page. Make sure there is a clear path to understanding your message. So here, I just want to outline a scenario. This will make it a bit easier to see the introduction in context. So John Briggs will be our presenter today. He's going to give a presentation on sales data from this Christmas sales period. Now, the objective of his presentation is to inform the management team about the results of the Christmas sale period and reflect on the sales data obtained. So here we go. Hello and good morning, everyone. As most of you know, I'm John Briggs, Senior Sales Analyst. It's a pleasure being here today, and I look forward to sharing our Christmas sales data with you. Now, the purpose of today's presentation is to share the Christmas sales data. Firstly, I'll be looking at the results of our Christmas sales campaign. Then I'll go on to discuss current market trends. And finally, I'll make some forecasts heading into the new year. I expect my talk to take about 20 minutes, and there'll be time for questions and extensive discussion at the end. Right, let's begin with this sales data analysis. Well, there you have a very short but clear introduction to a presentation. As you can see, we've followed the presentation introduction structure, so let's now break it down. So, the first structural element is the welcome, and John Briggs uses the following: hello and good morning, everyone. Okay, that's the first element. The next one, the personal introduction. As most of you know, I'm John Briggs, Senior Sales Analyst. Next part of the structural element is giving thanks. So it's a pleasure being here today. Okay, moving on to expressing the purpose of the presentation. The purpose of today's presentation is to share the Christmas sales data. Now, some structure and signposting language. Firstly, I'll be looking at. Then I'll go on to discuss. Finally, I'll make. And the next element is timing. I expect my talk to take about 20 minutes. And finally, the taking questions element. There'll be time for questions and extensive discussion at the end. So there you have it. That is pretty much a very clear overview of how to structure and outline the introduction of a presentation. So let's just wrap things up then. Well, as always, that brings us to the end of this episode and the first part in this series. So reflecting on what we have learnt today, let's review. So before we start preparing our presentation, we need to be clear on the communicative objective or message, okay, of the talk. And once we have this in mind, we're able to structure the ideas around what we are transmitting to our audience. Secondly, we need to make sure we structure and outline our presentation in Word first. Before we start with PowerPoint, remember that's key. And the golden rule is tell them what you're going to say, tell them, and then tell them what you said. Finally, to write out an effective and clear introduction, you just need the expressions and the outline from this episode. So if you're a AOBE Premium member, then you can download a copy of the transcript and guide. And if you're not yet a member, send me an email and I'll make sure you guys get a free 3-month trial. Okay, a little special offer for my listeners out there today. Now stay with me for the next few weeks as we cover some basics for giving presentations. What you can all do now is go through this episode, write up your presentation introduction and send it to me. I'll be more than happy to check it for you. Okay, so just send me an email and I'll have a look at your presentation introduction. Okay, and if you want to join us over at our private Facebook group, then please get in touch. I'll be more than happy to review your presentation introductions. And you can even record them and upload them to our Facebook group if you want to do them through video. Okay, be more than happy to give you some tips and some feedback. Okay, so we can do that through the Facebook group. Otherwise, I'll see you guys all next week. Have fun preparing and practicing your presentations, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.